Before we get started here, just a note. Please respect the speaker. Please silence your cell phones and other devices that you may have. I'll turn it over to the gentleman here in just a moment. I've been informed that he does have giveaways for the crowd to answer. If you answer the question correctly, he'll give something to you. So if that's not motivation to pay attention, I don't know what is. So, sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello and good afternoon. My name is Amol, and I hope you guys are enjoying this B-Sides as much as I am. So, has been a wonderful event since this morning. A little bit of introduction. I work for a company called Qualys. We, or at least my team, create signatures to identify vulnerabilities, possible threats, any sort of a misconfiguration, or a way in which an attacker or a hacker could break into your network. And that's sort of the basis of this talk and how this talk came along. So in the next hour or so, we'll take a look at point of sale systems, different or a particular type of malware which has in the recent past affected point of sale systems. We'll go over a demo of one such example malware that I've written, and we'll see how it behaves. So let's get started. Oh yeah, and about the giveaway. So I have, we'll talk about that later. So the agenda is win free stuff. Well, hopefully that should not be the only agenda for this presentation. What I have is pretty small speakers that you can use on your iPad or whatever, iPhone. During the presentation, what you have to do is you have to, first of all, when you see this icon, find a question which is on the slide. It's very obvious. And if you know the answer, just raise your hand, tell me the answer, and take away these two things. So apart from that, we'll look at POS systems and some credit card basics. Now this may be a little bit of a repetition for those of you who already are very familiar with POS system, with credit card data and things like that. But for the good of all of us, so that all of us are on the same page, I'll quickly go over some of the basic sort of POS systems and credit cards. We'll see how the attack works. There will be a demo. So what I have here is I have a fully functional POS system, a point of sale system, which I'm using as my presentation laptop. So, and then I'll describe what that means a little bit when we go towards the demo. And we'll also go over some of the countermeasures, some of the things that various different people can do so that we don't get affected with this POS malware. So this is the brief agenda. Let's get started. So the first slide itself has a question. So POS data breaches. This is a slide from the Verizon data breach report of 2013, and this is last year's Verizon data breach. And even last year it had POS systems at the forefront of data breaches. If you see, there are about 75% of the accommodation industry, so basically hotels, their data breach was due to POS systems. So this first column is the data breaches in POS systems. You have retail industry, which had 31% of their data breach or credit card theft due to POS systems. And a lot of vendors like Target, Neiman Marcus, and you know all the names, and I'm not here to deface any vendor. So they have been affected. Hint, hint, guys. They have been affected with POS data breaches. Next slide. Any answers? Yes. No, it's a good guess, but don't share your answers.
Okay, guys, keep googling, and you can, but we can just raise your hand when you have all the 4. So now you know what that is. So raise your hand when you have all the 4. As I said, it's a very silly trivia. So okay, going to credit cards. Now this is a pretty basic slide. Usually there are these 3 different types of credit cards. First is your usual magnetic stripe credit card. So on the back side of the credit card you have the magnetic stripe, which stores all the information like your credit card number, your name, your the expiry date of the credit card. The second type of credit card is chip and pin credit card, which is not found in US as of yet, but it's coming pretty soon. The third one is your PayPass, so which you sort of bring the card near the device and it can charge you. So our talk is mostly about the first 2 cards, or mostly about the first card. The reason I say it's about the second card is because even though you are from Europe, where chip and pin are the default credit card, still if you travel to US or if you want your card to be used internationally, it has a magnetic strip at the back and has all the same details that this card had. So basically this card can be considered similar to this card because it also has the magnetic stripe on the back side. So there are 2 ways of using the second card. So on the first card, if you see, there is this CVV on the back side of the card, and I want to make this clear right from the get-go, is there are 2 CVV numbers. So there is this one CVV number, which is the card verification number, which is on the magnetic stripe.
Target, Neiman Marcus, Michaels.
All right. Target, Michaels, Neiman Marcus, PF Chang's in 2014. So there are 2 CVV numbers. One is on the card in the magnetic stripe, and one is written on the back of the card, and these 2 numbers are different. So for now, let's just go with that. So yeah, 3 different types of cards, pretty simple here. This is your typical POS system, a point of sale systems. At the bottom are just some of the leading manufacturers. Nothing against any of them, these are all great companies. What a typical POS system consists of is a cash register, which usually comes out to dispense cash, or if you swipe a credit card, they store usually the credit card receipts in it. There is usually a touchscreen display where where the cashier enters the amount or enters the things that you have bought. There is a printer, but most importantly is a credit card reader and some sort of a central processing unit, which has your POS software. Also, one thing missing is a barcode, is a scanner here. So when you bring an item, they scan the item. So I didn't get a pretty picture with a scanner in it, but there is also a scanner to scan your items. And so this is what the system looks like. Usually a typical system looks like. Also what it has inside is the POS software or point of sale software. There are at least 2-3 dozen companies that make this point of sale software. Some of the examples I've given above, these are all very good companies. I have really high respect for them. But what it all boils down to is these logos at the bottom, as in all of this or most of this software runs on some flavor of Windows. So I hope no one runs on 95 anymore, but XP systems are very common in the POS world. So okay, that was the POS software, POS hardware. Now let's take a look at the magnetic stripe. This image is from qcard.com. I didn't draw it. Thank you, qcard. So a typical magnetic stripe and has 3 tracks. And you may already know about it, but let's just go over this pretty quickly. So the track 1 data is basically, it has 210 bits per inch. So this is what is on the back side of your card on the magnetic stripe. Track 1, 210 bits per inch, and it stores 7 bits per character. So that allows you, or basically the banks, to store 79 alphanumeric characters on track 1. that contains, and then we'll go in details about track 1 later. There is track 2, which contains 75 bits per inch data, and because it has only 75 bits per inch and 5 bits per character, it can store less amount of data. So it can store only 40 numeric characters. So pretty simple till now. Track 1 can store 79 alphanumeric characters. Track 2 can store 40 numeric characters. Track 3, which is not really found much in credit cards, has 5 bits per character and 107 numeric characters. It can store 107 numeric characters. But most credit cards don't use track 3. So for our malware, what is useful is track 1 and track 2 data. So this is the most busy slide of my presentation. It's a little difficult to read, but bear with me here. So the top part is basically track 1 data. This is how literally the different characters are stored on track 1. And at the bottom is the explanation or a diagram, again from cue card, of what it means. So basically it starts with start sentinel, so which is basically just a fancy name to like a start field. It basically tells that this is the start of the track 1 data, which is a %sign. Then it has a format code, which is B for credit cards. Usually that's what I've seen. After that, what follows is a 19-digit PAN or a primary account number. This usually is a credit card number which is printed on the front of your card. And this card number is a fake one, so don't worry about that. Followed by a field separator, which is a caret symbol, followed by 26 alphanumeric characters. Remember, track 1 can store alphanumeric characters. So this has basically your name, your last name / first name. Followed by again a field separator, which is a caret symbol, followed by additional data. So the first 4 bytes of additional data have the expiry date of the card in YYMM format. And the next 3 bytes are the service code. The service code is basically how can the card be used. Is it a debit card, credit card, what restrictions does it have, and whatnot. So that is stored in the service code. Followed by discretionary data. So this data has basically your PIN verification value, your card verification value, or the card verification code, the CVC that I mentioned earlier. And this CVC, as you remember, this is different than the CVC which is written or printed on the back of your card. And then it has again your end sentinel, which is basically to tell that that's the end of track 1 data. So this is all the information that is needed to process your card. If someone has all of this information, they can charge whatever amount that they want on your card, and if they submit this charge, it would be authorized unless you have canceled the card, because they have the CVV, they have the card number, and they have the PAN. Track 2 data is on the next slide. Again, I won't go into too much details, but it's very similar, except that since it cannot store alphanumeric characters, it doesn't have the name. It just has the primary account number and your additional data, which has your expiry date, service code, and CVV. So technically speaking, as far as I know, either track 1 or track 2 data can authorize a transaction. So your name is not really needed for authorizing the transaction. What happens is when you swipe your card, sometimes track 1 could be damaged, so track 2 could be readable. So your transaction would still go through if just track 2 data is available, and vice versa. So you can call it a little bit of a redundancy there. So that's basically track 1 data, that's your track 2 data, and pretty much concludes everything what we need to know as for this presentation about point of sale systems and credit cards. Oh, well, not completely. There are like a few transaction types. So the first type of transaction is very simple. We all do that almost every day, is a card swipe.
In this type of transaction, the card is swiped, so the CVV on the magnetic stripe as well as all the track1 data that we saw is used. While the second type of transaction is the card not present, or CNP transaction, where you do not swipe your credit card. This is when you buy things from Amazon, from eBay and whatnot. So in that case, they ask you to enter the CVV, which is on the back of your card. So when the card is not present, when it's not swiped, you don't know what is your CVV1, which is on the magnetic stripe. So in that case, they ask you for the CVV2, which is present physically on the back side of the card, just to make sure that you really possess the card, you really have physical access to the card. So these are the two types of transactions. Now we have heard, and don't read a lot into this slide, we have heard a lot about encrypting data in motion and encrypting data at rest. And I think most companies, most software, most hardware does that very nicely, as in when you transmit card data for authorization, it's transmitted securely in an encrypted form. When you store data, which usually merchants don't store data, but people who do store data, they store it very well with encryption and all the jazz that is on the slide. But where the data is unencrypted is in the process's memory. So when you swipe a card, there is some amount of time when that unencrypted data is present in the point of sale process's memory. And that's the key. That is where a lot of the POS malware, or this so-called RAM scrapers or RAM scraping malware, they scrape the data from this other process's memory. And so basically point to take is, just because data is encrypted at rest and in motion, or when it is sent, that still leaves the data in process, as they say, when the data is being processed unencrypted. And that's what the point of sale malware attacks. So here is a attack scenario. Let's say, as you already saw, a lot of these point of sale devices are nothing but Windows boxes. They can be multitask. They can be used to check your Facebook accounts, your emails, play games and whatnot. So attack scenario is, there is a phishing attack against the operator using the point of sale system. He or she is using clicks on a link that they received on email, on Facebook, on some other device, and malware gets infected on the point of sale system. Next, what happens is, at the time of transaction, a customer scans the card, and the point of sale the point of sale software, before sending or maybe after sending the credit card details for authorization, for some time it has this data unencrypted in its process. And that's where the RAM scraper malware, it basically starts at work, as in it sort of takes over the POS process and scrapes memory from that process, or possibly from the end, possibly does that continuously from the entire RAM of the machine to check for credit card numbers. And we'll see shortly how that can be achieved. So this is the attack scenario. Let's go to attack working. So step first, I think, is the POS malware. This is, what are these steps for? These steps are steps that the malware takes. So now we are sort of thinking from the point of view of malware. If I am a malware, what would I do? How would I steal these credit card numbers from this other process? So the first step here that the malware does is it finds the POS process which has credit card data. Now this is not a mandatory process. This is an optional step, but usually, I mean, even if you have a low-powered machine, an old machine with 32-bit operating system and 32-bit processes, it can still access about 2 GB of virtual memory. If you have a 64-bit OS and a 32-bit process, it can still access about, again, I don't remember the numbers very well, but it can still access about, I think, 4 GB of memory.
If you have a 64-bit machine or 64-bit OS and a 64-bit process, then I think the process can allocate terabytes of memory. So it's very effective if instead of just blindly scraping the entire memory for credit card numbers, if you fine-tune if the malware fine-tunes, and that's what most of the malware does, is they basically have the top 10 point of sale system software is what they target, top 10, top 15, and they don't scrape the entire RAM. They just look for that process, and that is how they target it. This can be done in various ways, by looking at the title in the windows, by looking at the way the process is registered. There are a lot of ways you can do this, and the way I did it in the demo later is using some of these Windows system APIs. So if you are, if you are a developer, you can just write down the sequence of these APIs, and at the end of this talk, you would be able to write a RAM scraper malware. So the first step that it does is finds the POS process. The second step that it does is it elevates its own privileges. Now there is a special privilege called as SE debug name, and if you are able to elevate your process's privilege to that, then pretty much you can attack other processes, attach to other processes, and do a whole lot of other things. So most Windows machines are run with administrative credentials. I have yet to meet a person who says that they really have made, they really don't use admin accounts. But this is what the POS process does, is if it's able to elevate its own privileges to SE debug name, then it can basically attack and attach to other processes. So this is the step 2 that it does. There are certain system API calls that you need to use in a peculiar way that I've mentioned here to gain those privileges. And the third thing, after you gain those privileges, or if you are able to gain those privileges, is very simple. You open the POS process. It's basically, it's as if you are just opening a gift, because you already have those privileges. You just open the POS process as your gift, and inside the POS, and you do that by the simple open process call. I think everyone knows about this one. After you open the POS process, the point of sale process, the credit card number has to be there somewhere in an encrypted format, and you basically then just scrape the POS process's virtual memory by various virtual memory calls and doing read process memory and whatnot. So this is, I think it's a pretty simple and straightforward thing to do. I don't think it really requires or has much complexity. When we look at the demo code, you will see it's hardly about 3 pages long. So there is not much involved in this, and scraping RAM is relatively very easy as against popular belief. So it's a pretty straightforward thing to do. So with this information on how the malware does that, okay. And one last thing. So in the last step, basically, when it scrapes the RAM, again, that RAM scraping is easy, but it's sort of like finding a needle in the haystack, because memory, even if you target one single process, could be huge. There could be a lot of pages in that process memory, and you want to optimize it. You are basically running against time, because the POS software, that is also not written by like just dummies. The POS software will try to keep unencrypted data in memory as less for a very short time, as only at a very small time, bare minimum time. And then it will try to either write zeros in that data structure, or write ones, or clear the memory, clear the buffer, so that it can't be attacked. So what one needs to do, or what the malware does, is it has to optimize to do this scraping really fast before the transaction is over. And you could do that. At least my example code does that by only looking for memory that is committed. So again, as I mentioned, if you have a 64-bit machine and a 64-bit process, you could potentially access terabytes of memory. But you only look for memory with certain flags which tell you that this memory has really been committed to physical memory. And that's the mem commit flag basically. You also ignore memory that is part of the executable image. So most of the memory in the POS process, so when the POS process is loaded in memory, most of the code is executable code that it basically is being executed. So you ignore all the executable image with the mem image flag, and you read or scrape only the memory which has data structures, which has variables. And so a lot of your executable memory is gone if you use this flag. And another thing that you could do is, once you find a credit card number, you could remember memory addresses at which you found it the first time. And next time you could first go to those addresses, check if the numbers are there, and so that's another optimization. A lot of these POS systems still use Windows XP, or a lot of the POS processes, they are not ASLR enabled or anything like that. So there is a good chance that if you find a credit card number for one customer at a certain memory location, when the next customer comes and swipes his or her card, you will find that the POS process, when it allocates buffers and variables, it's being done by the process and by the OS around the same virtual addresses. So these are some of the optimizations that would help any malware to find this needle in the haystack, which is basically the 16-digit credit card number in entire POS memory. And the last thing to do is to do pattern match. So basically, from our track 1 and track 2 data that we just saw, we know that it starts with the %sign, there is a B, then there is a caret. Of course, the credit card number would be a variable, the name would be a variable, it will change from card to card. The CVV would be a variable, but these delimiters are fixed, which is the %B, caret, and question mark. So you basically look for these delimiters in memory. Once you find them, you assume that this is a number, this is the credit card number. And then what you could do is you could put that credit card number into something which is called as the card verification algorithm. So this algorithm will tell you if it is a valid credit card number or not. So there are two ways of doing it. One is a lot of credit cards like MasterCard, Visa card, American Express card. Yes? Sure? You're very close. I'll still give it to you. It's, oh man, you have a lot of competition, so sorry. Go ahead. Sorry? Yeah, those are the first numbers of the credit card. So basically, MasterCard starts, all MasterCard numbers, if you get a credit card from your wallet, would start from 5. If you have a Visa card, it will start from 4. If you have American Express, it will start from 3. These are the first digit of your credit card basically, and all the other cards, they also have some fixed digits. So you could either do that, or you could do basically the LUN algorithm, which basically verifies if any credit card number is good or not. I would prefer to do the algorithm. And the algorithm is also pretty simple. It's like a glorified base 10 algorithm. What you do is you take the credit card number. This is the original credit card number. Don't assume that it will always be 16 digits, because there are credit card numbers that are not 16 digits. There are less. So you drop the last number that you have, and then you basically reverse the digits. So you drop the last number 5, you reverse the digit. So the third line is just a reverse of the second line. Then you multiply odd digits by 2. So the first digit was 5, it got multiplied by 2, so that's 10. The second digit is kept as is, the third digit is again multiplied by 2, and you continue. Then you subtract 9 if the number is greater than 9. So 10 is greater than 9, you subtract 9, you get 1. This is not greater than 9, this is greater than 9, so you subtract 9 from it again. And you do that for all numbers. And basically then you add all the numbers together. And in this case you got an 85. And the verification is basically if you add 85 to the number that you dropped and you do a mod 10 of it, you should get a 0. And if you get a 0, then that's a valid credit card number. This algorithm, guys, is documented very well on the net. You will find it everywhere. So, I think the slides are really pretty. So, feel free to take pictures, but it can be found. It can be found anywhere on the net. And that's what I guess you would do is once you find these regular expressions starting with caret, ending with this, you extract the number, make sure all the digits are numeric, and then you apply this algorithm. If the mod 10 is 0, then yes, you have a valid credit card number. And again, this algorithm is very simple, as in this is a C code that I wrote, and it's, literally it's just a few lines of code. You can literally type this in your C compiler. It will compile and it will give you if a credit card number is valid or not. And there are again 1,000 different ways of doing this. I'm pretty sure a lot of you can optimize it more, but this is a bare bone code that will work. So what did we do? What did the malware do? It found the process, it elevated its privileges, it what was the third thing? It opened the POS process, which had the unencrypted credit card number, and then it did this screen scraping, found the credit card number, ran it through an algorithm, made sure that it's a valid credit card number. So time for the demo. So what I have here, and before maybe going to the demo, I can just quickly show you the source. It's, as I said, it's just a very small 3 pages worth of source. Maybe it's not too readable here, so I think we can just skip the source here. But I was very tempted to make this open source, and I think I may do that. But a friend of mine told me that such malware is still sold in the black market for like $500, $600, something like that. So no, I'm not trying to make money here. It's just I just want to make sure that it doesn't fall in the wrong hands. So if you are a researcher, if you have any question about this, if you are trying to do RAM scraping or something like that, just send me a message on Twitter. I have my Twitter handle at the end of the presentation, and I'll be glad to give you the source or help you out, or as long as you sort of work for some good legitimate company, I can give you this. So in the demo here, what I have is this point of sale system. It's a pretty well-known point of sale system from a multi-billion-dollar company, and I really mean multi-billion-dollar company. And it can accept this. I have a card reader here where I can swipe cards, and I have a card here which has been cancelled. So again, feel free to take pictures. It's a Pep Boys card. But it's a credit card. So what typically happens is, let's say I'm a cashier, I'm user Joe, I come here, I check in. Let's say I am Chris B, I clock in. Now it says, okay, now you have 2 cashiers. What I'll do is, this is just the inventory. So what this shop does, it sells some sporting goods, softballs, sweatpants, and whatnot. So this is my inventory. So, okay, typical credit card system. This is, I see the employee list. So I'm Chris B, I'm clocked in, looks all good. So a customer comes in, he or she has, like, just imagine, has bought like a few items. So what I'll do is I'll make a sale. I'll say, okay, what do you have here? Let's say something with baseball. So they purchased a baseball hat. Let's say they purchase, what else do you guys want to buy? Help me out. Baseball. They just have a lot of hats. Let's say a bat. A bat choke. Okay. Okay, I'm just having too much fun. So okay, they bought some items. I scanned it, and this all came. The total is $16.11. And now, so in here for demo purpose, this is my Visual Studio directory where the source is compiled in the release directory. And this is the name of my executable, which is the screen scraping, credit card stealing, evil malware. So what I do here is, as a cashier, I say, okay, do you want to pay by cash or credit? Credit. I hit credit. What they do is swipe the card, and at this point, basically the credit card number is unencrypted in the POS process. So if I really had the malware, I would have the malware run continuously. For demo purpose, I'll basically just hit enter here, and what this would do is follow all the 4 steps that we just talked about. It would find the POS process, it would elevate its privileges, it would open the process, and it would scrape the memory for unencrypted credit card numbers. So let's see if the demo gods are with us or not, because I don't have a backup video for this. So I just press enter here, and boom. What I got was memory location this. It was able to extract credit card number, which is, I don't think I can show it to you guys, but it's exactly the same one that is on the card, 407, 412, 298, blah, blah, blah. It was able to get my name. It was able to get the expiration date. It was able to get the service code. There was no PVKI, but there was a CVV 1082, which is what is used to authorize the transaction. So basically, it was able to capture all the track 1 data, because my malware, as you recall, it looks for these special characters and tries to find track 1 data. And actually, it was able to get the same data twice. So again, I haven't reversed the process, the POS process, but it must be that in some array or in some variable, the data is stored twice. So, and I don't know why. That must be a very peculiar thing for this particular POS software, but it's stored twice. So since the RAM scraping software, it doesn't really know. It just scrapes the RAM and looks for those patterns, runs it through the algorithm. It found the same data twice. So, well, guys, that's the demo. Woohoo! Work! One peculiar thing, so here it had stalled. So it is asking me, do I want to collect a tip? Which is, I don't know who tips at a sporting shop, but this is, so let's say I do no tip, and the authorization goes, and it says authorized, and the transaction is done. Now, if I go and run the software, run my this, it's gone. It's not able to find. It's able to find the process. It says using POS process ID. It was able to find the process ID for that process, but the credit card number is gone. So actually, the software is pretty good. As soon as the transaction is complete, it is zeroing out the memory. So it's what I am assuming is that it not just frees the memory, but it also makes sure to write zeros or ones or something on that memory in that variable, so that such attacks are not possible. But the sort of a bad thing that it did was the dialog box where it stopped to say, do you want to add some tip or not? That is when the variables or the credit card number was still in the process unencrypted. If they fix that, then it's, as I said, it's again race against time. How fast you can process the credit card, send it over, get the authorization, and dump the unencrypted card from your process versus the malware, how fast it can read your process and how fast it can basically get these numbers. Hmm? If the malware is what?
If the malware is persistent in memory all the time, then it shouldn't matter how briefly.
At the end of that, it would still matter, because if if it's a 64-bit OS and a 64-bit process, and potentially, these systems are huge. They have a lot of memory allocated, so it has to still go through the entire memory. So it is. It's basically, as I said, race against time. Like if you can clear out the unencrypted data before the malware can get it, then it's good. So like, let's say if this is card data, it is being authorized. This malware scraper is like going here, here, here. If you are able to authorize it and basically destroy the data, the malware may not be able to get it. So it's yeah, go ahead.
Instead of going into the POS system itself, couldn't you just do a non-destructive read on data coming in on the serial line or parallel line instead of doing a RAM scrape of the POS software?
You could do that. You couldn't sniff the data that the process is sending to authorization, because it encrypts that and sends it for authorization.
Well, when you swipe the card, right?
Yeah. You could very well do that as well. Yes, that is a possibility. But what we have seen with all the hacks that are happening these days is, for some reason, maybe this is just too easy to do. That's why attackers are doing that. I think I had one more. Go ahead. And guys, I have like 1 or 2 more slides, so yes.
Instead of having a race against time, since you're already getting the SE debug process permission, is it possible to just debug all memory writes, and that way, yes, the program's slower, but no one's really going to notice that extra slowness, and you could process every credit card number that comes through without missing them.
Yeah, you could do that as well. There are, again, guys, this is just the way I wrote it. There are a lot of ways you could write it, and a lot of other creative ways of stealing your card number. So let me just go to this last slide, which I think still has some good discussion points, if I can find it. So what can we do? What are some of the mitigation techniques? So one is use POS only for its intended purpose. So if people use point of sale system as point of sale system and don't check their email or Facebook or whatever, then the chances are that they won't click anything and the malware won't get downloaded in the first place. So I think that's the first thing, which is use the system. It's a very simple thing, but use the system for its intended use. Don't use it to browse the net or whatever. Try to protect against insider threats. And this is from the perspective of the POS business owner, if I own the business. So this idtheftcenter.org said that in 2013, in last year, 11% of the data breaches were because of insider threats, which is basically the cashier was a bad guy, or someone came in, handed the cashier at 7-Eleven a $100 note and say, just plug in this USB in your POS and then give it back to me. And 11%, and I think that's really big. So what POS owners have to really do is sort of to vet the people they hire, but I know it's very difficult in those type of jobs where a lot of people are just temp people. Best practices: don't use, even if you are using Windows, don't use administrative credentials. So even if the POS process needs admin credentials, you can log in as a user with lower rights, use the run as, which is sort of like sudo, well not really, but run as facilities in Windows where you can run the POS process as admin. But if you go to the internet, download the malware, it won't run it as admin. So it won't get that debug right, the SE debug right. and then, well, things won't work. Other things, patching, access control, scanning, auditing. Deploy smart cards or chip and pin cards. This is okay. I mean, this is sort of still a half-baked solution. I mean, it's going to be, a lot of US merchants will shift to smart cards by the end of this year. But still, it doesn't matter if your credit card has a chip or not. It really matters on what are the capabilities of the reader. So if this is, let's say this is a smart card and has a chip on it, what the chip does is basically it has a private key which basically encrypts your credit card number, and what it's sent is just the transaction ID. Your credit card number never gets from here to the POS system. It's basically on the device itself. It is authorized, and what it's sent is just the transaction numbers. But anyway, let's say this is a card which has the chip and pin, but all the cards with chip and pin still have the magnetic reader for backwards compatibility. Otherwise, all the foreigners who in Europe, in Japan, they use chip and pin. When they come to US, their cards won't work with this. So even though you have chip and pin, they have magnetic stripe, and then you swipe, and then you again have the same problem. So this problem, I don't think, would go away unless all card readers don't look like this. They look like the chip and pin readers, and all the credit cards don't have anything on the back. The magnetic strip on the back doesn't exist. From the POS software vendor's perspective, again, we talked about it, keep the unencrypted data as little, for very short time in memory, as little as possible. And the last thing is where, again, I want audience participation. I don't have anything to give away, but what can credit card users do? And I really don't have a good answer. I mean, in the US, I think the credit card industry is all on trust. When you go to a restaurant, you get the check, you give this card to the cashier, they walk away with it. There, they can have a very simple system like this where they just swipe a blank card, and they have duplicated your credit card. In most other countries, in European countries, in Japan, in Asia, in South Asia, India, in a lot of other countries, they have, first of all, chip and pin, and then they bring the credit card device to you. So basically, no matter how fancy the restaurant is, they will come with that card reader in their hand, and then you yourself put your PIN, or you do the transaction. So it is at least a little bit, of course, that device itself could be hacked, but I mean, most probably it's a little difficult. So that is a little bit better, where at least the card doesn't go out of my sight, where anyone can have like a credit card reader, swipe it, take a blank credit card, swipe it again, and there you go, my credit card is gone. So that's all I have. Thank you. This is my Twitter handle. Feel free to email me with questions, with examples, or anything that you need. It's just that as of now, I'm not too comfortable in just putting the code on, on Google or somewhere where it's anyone can access it. But if you are a researcher or just someone legitimate, feel free to send me a message on Twitter, and I can help you out. Thank you.